full-time MMA?
MMA.
Nothing
Yeah.
else?
My life, man, yeah.
Or is this full-time MMA now?
I love full-time MMA right now.
Back to the daily grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to subscribe if you're new and hook your boy up with a like if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
The UFC's female flyweight champion Chris Cyborg is coming out and speaking up for her friend and fellow Brazilian and teammate Fabricio Werdum. Fabricio Werdum has had to come out and apologize recently, and he's going to have to do outreach in the LGBTQ community because he almost got into a physical altercation with Tony Ferguson at the UFC 216 lunch presser. And before the almost physical altercation, there was a verbal altercation in which Fabricio Werdum called Tony Ferguson a maricón more than 5 times. And maricón translates into faggot. So Chris Cyborg is saying, well, all you social justice warriors have out your Google Translator, translate how Fabricio Werdum's comments are wrong, but it's okay for the UFC to say I have a penis. And I mean, I'll answer that before we go into the actual statement. You know, Fabricio Werdum has an athlete's conduct policy, and to my knowledge, the only people in the UFC who have really kind of hinted that Chris Cyborg has a penis are not athletes. You know, if she's talking about Joe Rogan or on his podcast, it was actually a comedian, Tony Hinchcliffe, I believe, who made the joke, you know, if Chris Cyborg's having so much issues cutting weight, why doesn't she just chop off her cock? You know what I'm saying? That was a joke made on Joe Rogan's podcast, but it wasn't even actually, that's a pretty funny joke, but it wasn't even actually Joe Rogan who made that joke. And, you know, the other people, and I'm pretty sure there's probably been other people that said it that work for the UFC, but they're not athletes, and so they didn't sign an athlete's conduct policy, which is why Fabricio Werdum is in trouble. If you read the UFC statement, they said he's in trouble because he signed the athlete's conduct policy and he violated that policy. So that's the reason he's in trouble. So but this is Chris Cyborg's full statement, and we'll get a little more into it after we read this. You can read along on the side if you want, but she says, for many years, people inside the company have said that I have a penis. Yes, ridiculous to read, but this I have endured for years, and still I continue having attacks with this by people alienated by the media. And when I read this story, I thought because when we Brazilians are attacked, we have no protection. When we defend ourselves against attacks, we are punished. In fact, serving the community we do with pleasure. We become more human. There are many who should have this punishment, and other things we Brazilians should be respected just like any other athlete from another country. You know why? Brazil is the #1 country with international contracts with television. That is to say where they make the most money among all countries outside the USA. So Chris Cyborg is saying, hey, we give the UFC a lot of money, so they need to respect us Brazilian athletes the way they respect these other athletes from other countries. And, you know, to me, I mean, if this is really what and it comes from Google Translator, that last part, I mean, to me, this is kind of bullshit. I mean, I understand what she's saying, but this is kind of like the Tyron Woodley shit. Is she saying like the UFC is racist against Brazilians? I mean, I'm not with that shit. I don't think that's the case. Does she think Fabricio? Hey, dude, Fabricio Werdum's actually been getting leeway because he's Brazilian. He called fucking Daniel Cormier a maricón a week ago, and it went under the fucking rug. Daniel Cormier wasn't even talking. Fabricio Werdum wasn't even in the fucking conversation. Daniel Cormier was talking about John Jones, and Fabricio Werdum comes in his comments calling him a faggot. If he would have said that shit in English, faggot, they would have already been on his head. You think that he don't get to say faggot because he's Brazilian? No. If he said that shit in English, he would have been in trouble a long time ago. So he really is getting a little bit of leeway because he's saying maricón instead of faggot, which translates into the same thing. So what are you saying? Because, you know, you got Brazil is the #1 country with international contracts with television. You should get to say that word. I mean, that's fine. You can say whatever you want, but don't expect it to not be any repercussions. I mean, you can lose contracts, or if you signed an athlete's conduct policy that says, hey, you can't say faggot in any language. Don't think you can say it and not have to apologize or do some outreach programs. And you know, it's different whenever Joe Rogan or a comedian on his podcast says it, because to my knowledge, Joe Rogan didn't sign an athlete's conduct policy. He's not an athlete. Joe Rogan gets a little more leeway. Joe Rogan's got history in this sport. You know what I'm saying? Joe Rogan is the motherfucking man. What the fuck you talking about? and anyways, if Joe Rogan, it's not like Joe Rogan's coming out and saying it every fucking day. If he said it one time in the past, I'm sure they even talked to him about it, like, hey, just be a little easy, dog. It's not like Joe Rogan's coming out every podcast starting it out with hey, Cyborg has a dick. No, he's not. So just because they've made a mistake in the past doesn't mean every single Brazilian athlete should just get to come out and break the rules because you have the biggest international contracts. Because there's a lot of Brazilian athletes that aren't coming out here and calling somebody a faggot every time they get the chance. Like Amanda Nunes, she's the fucking shit. I fuck with Amanda Nunes. There's a lot of Jessica Andrade, mini Cyborg. I mean, even Chris Cyborg. I'm a fan of Chris Cyborg. But to me, this is coming out and kind of sounding like, she's calling the UFC racist because Fabricio Werdum doesn't get to say faggot. So, I mean, maybe she's just using this, since everybody's got their Google Translator out to kind of make sure that they know that Joe Rogan, that other people in the UFC have said she has a penis. But as long as it's not an athlete, that signed a conduct policy, there's not really anything wrong with it as far as rules being broken. So it is what it is. Let the haters know what the fuck you tell me in the comments. I'm out. What do you call a singing laptop? Adele.